Hello everybody, and thank you for watching this video. In this video, we'll be talking about training and development. Some of you in the past may have heard that hiring staff is kind of an investment on the part of an organization or a restaurant, and a lot of that investment comes from training money that we have to spend in order to train our new associates, which makes the actual process of training extremely important. Not to mention the process by which we create training programs and how we go about it. One example I can give of that was when I very young in my management career, and I was training a server, and I was I very new to the training thing, and I was focused on pretty much everything else other than training this person while I was supposed to be training him. And after a week went by, which is typically our training period for a server, I went into the office. I was talking with my GM, and he said, "Hey, we're going to be firing this person today." And I was like, "Oh wow, like that's not very good," because I trained him, and I immediately felt bad because I felt like I had to let that person down by not training them effectively, because obviously by the end of their training they couldn't perform the duties of a server, so we had to let him go. You know what I mean? And hey, um, we lost the investment that we had, spent to train this particular server, and in the end, we ended up firing him and had to hire another person, right? So we had lost that investment, and B, that was my fault because I didn't train him properly. So that's why it's important to know how to train people, and what that means and what the process is, and things like that. So some fairly important things we're going to be speaking about today. A lot of this you can take immediately into industry and start training people. The purpose of training and performance management. Um, Both training and performance management go hand in hand in a lot of ways, because training is about us as trainers or as management, get, helping the new employee understand their role and place within an organization, and helps them understand what success looks like and how to achieve success in their role through training. But a big part of training is, performance management, or monitoring staff's performance and providing constructive feedback so that the goals of the organization are achieved, right? And if we can do this, if we train people properly and monitor their performance, we create staff that are both effective and efficient, whereby creating a higher probability of achieving the organizational goals and increased profitability. So as we begin to speak about training, I guess the best way to present this is, from the very beginning. So before we actually train our staff how to be efficient and effective within our organization, it's important that we first provide that staff member with an orientation and engage in onboarding. Okay, um, while onboarding is a piece of orientation, and we'll talk more about that in the following slides, it's extremely important for a few different reasons, which we're going to talk about. Um, One example I can give of orientation and onboarding, or what that looks like in our industry, is typically on the first day a new staff member will come in. We'll show them around the restaurant. We'll introduce them to different people. Obviously introduce them to the boss. Help them understand a bit more about their role and how they fit in the organization, and that kind of provides the basis for that orientation into the organization and the beginning of the onboarding process. If you think back when you started with the college, in your first year, your first semester, you may or may not have come to a college orientation day or the program orientation day. That is where we kind of onboarded you to the college, right? So I'm pretty sure they showed you around the college. You met your program instructors, some of your professors, and that way you kind of understood what was where in the college, if you understand my meaning. And that's what we need to do with our new staff in the restaurant, or whatever business we're talking about. Is the very first step on their first day of work, we need to provide an orientation and begin to onboard them. employee orientation. So orientation is the very first step in the onboarding process where we help, help the employee understand again their role, their surroundings, any resources that they have access to. But we can also complete some of the several human resources and payroll forms required, for for bureaucracy purposes. For example, when again, we'd have a new staff member in the restaurant. I did a tour with them around the restaurant to show them, where the kitchen was, the walk-in freezer, the back door, stuff like that. We'd sit down, and there's several policies that they'd have to sign off on. So there was a social media policy, basically saying you can't slander the restaurant or post inappropriate things about the restaurant. There was the payroll forms that included their hourly rate, and they brought in either a blank check or a direct deposit form. Okay, they filled out an employee agreement, so a contract. And again, that just an example of the first step, which is orientation, in completing those relevant forms. Okay, this helps create a more productive or successful worker in a shorter period of time. Because they understand where to go, right? You can imagine if you had to take some empty inserts or dirty inserts to the dish pit, it's going to take you a lot less time if you know where the dish pit is, right? Opposed to not knowing where the dish pit is, you might have to walk around for a little bit, ask somebody. You get the idea. That's kind of a silly example, but it's helping employees understand their environment. Orientation topics. So here are some topics that we can engage in with a new staff member during orientation, right? So the first and foremost is organizational information. So helping them understand a bit more about the organization. So, the goals of the organization, its mission, vision, any relevant policies, history, and in some cases provide the new employee with an employee handbook. As I mentioned before, we also have to fill out some paperwork. Okay, so the employee needs to bring in a direct deposit form, has to sign off on relevant human resources materials, things like that. Okay, the amount of human resources paperwork that is really filled out will differ from organization to organization. For example, the first restaurant I worked at, I just gave them my direct deposit form and signed a form for an employment contract. Okay, whereas when I started with the most recent restaurant I worked at, there was like a book that I had to read, telling me about the organization, some of the policies, the uniform, grooming standards, things like that. So the amount of human resources paperwork will differ from organization to organization. However, one that is constant across all organizations is the payroll. Okay, so again, that's that direct deposit form, as well as an employment agreement. Next, during orientation, you want to do some introductions. Okay, so you want to introduce the new staff member to their supervisor, their boss, co-workers that they're going to be working with, right? And maybe if if you have some specific trainers in mind, you can introduce them then, right? That helps. And if you're helping make those introductions, the new staff member feels a bit more at home. Knows who to go talk to, and isn't maybe that the new employee's a little shy, and this just helps with that process of getting over that shyness, right? And lastly, another orientation topic would be helping the new staff member understand their job objectives. Okay, so we're going to show them where their job is actually going to be executed. Okay, we're going to give them an overview of what their day looks like. We're going to talk about safety on the job. We're going to point out where they would get any relevant personal protection equipment or things like that. We're going to help them understand the tasks that they're going to be required to complete, along with any duties and relevant reporting relationships. For example, in restaurants, yes, everyone reports to the chef, but there's also a bit of a structure, either using the brigade system or, in the restaurants I worked at, we had a chef, we had a senior sous, and then we had two junior sous, right? So, a new staff member, you would want to be like, okay, so you talk to your junior sous, they report to the senior sous, and then the senior sous reports to the chef. You should be reporting any concerns, like on an operational basis, to your junior sous first. If you can't find them, then the senior sous, and if you can't find that person, then go to your chef. And then doing all of these things, again, just helps them understand their place in the organization, what they're going to be doing. It helps, um, helps them get over that shyness that they may be experiencing on the first day, and helps them be aware of any policies and goals that we have within our organization. The benefits of orientations. So, if we do all those things with our new staff member that we had just talked about on the previous slide, it helps our employees get up to speed quicker, helps them be more efficient and effective as sooner than if you hadn't done an orientation. It kind of relieves that little bit of stress that a new employee will have, okay, primarily through those introductions, things like that. And it helps establish a positive can-do attitude at the very beginning of the employment relationship, right? It just helps the employee understand their role, where they fit in the organization, and it helps them or makes them think or gives them the attitude that obviously as an employer we care because we're taking the time to provide an orientation, and we should be. Okay, I've been to one of my very first management job within a restaurant. I got zero orientation, zero training, and one of the negative effects for me was that I felt like they didn't care enough to provide these things to me. And it created a lot of stress for me because I didn't know where to find things. I didn't know how to do things, and I had to figure it out all by myself, right? So it created a lot of stress, and it impacted my ability to perform efficiently and effective for the first couple months of my employment there, because again, there was no orientation and no training. Effective onboarding. So onboarding is very simply the continuation of orientation. Okay, if we understand that orientation happens on the very first day of with a new staff member, onboarding is the continuation of that over several months. Okay, the onboarding is just helping share the small, little tiny details that will help make an employee more successful. Okay, it gives them a sense of comfort and familiarity within an organization, and it helps them, gives them the message that they're valued as a new employee. Okay, so this onboarding should continue over several months. Okay, and during that time, it's really important to have a very strong line of communication with that staff member. Not only because are they going through training, but also because they may have concerns, questions as a new staff member, and those really need to be answered. Okay. Um, Again, the difference between onboarding and orientation is that orientation begins on the day one. Okay, and onboarding is the continual or the continuation of orientation for the next couple months, whereby we share minute or specific details about how that person is to be efficient or effective. And in order to do that, we need to communicate with that staff member as often as humanly possible. So purposes of onboarding. Here, I'm just going to put them all up here. There we go. There are many purposes to onboarding, and they're all fairly beneficial to the organization. Okay, I'm not going to touch on all of these here. I think I'm just going to talk about the ones that I feel are extremely important or relevant to a manager. Okay, first and foremost, it reduces turnover. Okay, so if you're giving a good orientation and providing a good onboarding, then the employee feels valued, like it's a good place to work, and then they don't quit. They stay with the organization, right? If you don't do an onboarding, it can create a thing called cognitive dissonance or dissonance. And the example that I had give previously, where I didn't get an onboarding or an orientation, I didn't know what I was doing for a couple of months, and I felt like I was failing at my job, and I hated it. That is an example of a negative effect of not providing an orientation or an onboarding to new staff. I mean, in my case, I didn't quit, but it happens more often than you'd think. Okay, and as we reduce turnover, okay, it also reduces costs, right? Because that staff member is staying with us, we don't have to continuously hire people and train them. At which, again, like I had mentioned at the beginning of this video, has a cost, right? Um, Onboarding also helps us establish clear performance expectations. Okay, so that's when we're describing the role to the new staff member or the new employee, what's expected of them, and what success looks like. Okay. It increases employee morale because they feel valued, because we're taking the time to train them properly, or sorry, to provide an orientation and a good onboarding. They feel like we care about them and we're invested in their success. Okay, it also helps transmit a brand image or a culture of teamwork and camaraderie within an organization, because again, if we're providing a good orientation and a good onboarding, our staff members feel valued, like they're contributing to the organization, and it's about that teamwork in the culture. Um, but organizational stability as well, because again, we're reducing turnover. So we have a fairly stable team within our organization who is collectively trying to achieve the organizational goals. Okay, so it's a very stable atmosphere. Okay, and yeah, I think I've touched on. Oh, the last one here. A good onboarding and even orientation helps reduce the need for disciplinary action or corrective action. Okay, while yes, we should be monitoring performance and uh, and taking corrective action where necessary, doing a good onboarding and helping, setting those clear expectations and helping them understand their role, we we won't need to correct them on that later, right? So all good reasons for orientations and onboarding, and they're all beneficial to the organization. If you take all of these, while these are all positive, for example, reduces errors, organizational stability, reduces need for discipline, reduces turnover, increases morale. If you take all these and you turn them into their negative versions, okay, so for example, reduced errors and costs, if you take that and you reverse it to increased errors and costs, these are all the negative side effects that can happen with the omission of a good onboarding. The onboarding checklist. So I've posted an onboarding checklist to Blackboard. Take a look at it. Okay, so review the checklist example and look at some of the expected outcomes, and then think. You know, keep in mind or think about that some companies stop at orientation, don't do an onboarding, and then think, why is this so harmful to the company? Okay, and then on the flip side, consider, how would this impact you as an employee? Would this make you feel valued? Do you think there's any benefits to you or the organization if businesses were to do this with you? Okay, and then feel free to use this checklist when you're onboarding somebody in industry. So if we've uh, given our new staff members an effective onboarding and orientation, the next step in this process is to begin training. So in this lecture, or this part of the lecture, we'll now be teaching you or telling you the why and how of training so that you can engage in it effectively to make your staff efficient and effective. Types of training. So here's where we're going to discuss what training is, what it's not, and some two types of training that we can engage in. Firstly, as a general definition, training is helping the employee acquire job-related knowledge as well as skills and behaviors that are specific to their role, in helping them become efficient and effective within that role. For example, some skills that would be relevant to a line cook would be knife skills, okay, certain prep instructions, okay, for knowledge, and how to successfully complete a specific dish that is delivered from their station. Development, on the other hand, is not training. Well, it is kind of training, but it's not necessary, or it differs from training in that development is helping an employee understand knowledge and skills in order for them to be taking on a new role in the future. Okay, usually this is when people are being groomed and prepped for a higher position. Okay, so this is where a sous chef, a senior sous, would be learning about profit and loss statements in order to become a successful chef in the future. But it's not required of their position as a senior sous. Okay, going back to training, in order to help in order to help our employees understand, the knowledge and related skills and behaviors of the role, we can engage in either formal training or informal training, which is what we'll talk about next. So the differences between formal and informal training. Formal training is instructor-led and includes a learning environment where they learn the specific behaviors, knowledge, and skill sets in order to be effective in their role. Okay. Informal, on the other hand, is learner-initiated. Okay, so there's not necessarily a trainer in this case. It happens from a staff member being motivated to learn and develop new skills or hone their skills in order to be successful or more successful in their job. And informal training does not include a formal learning environment opposed to, or that exists with formal training. Okay, now as you see these three arrows, I guess, all pointing towards together, is that these two things, informal training and formal training, don't need to happen separately. These things can happen at the exact same time. If we've picked the right staff through recruitment and proper selection, our trainees or our new staff will be motivated to enhance their own in learning, want to learn more. That they're not getting from the formal training. So these two things don't have to happen separately. They can happen at the same time. One example, I was training a general manager at a particular restaurant that was going to go and be a GM at a different restaurant. And you know what I mean? I was showing him the computer system and how to use it, where to find applications, reports, generate reports, things like that. And then, I stopped and I was like, "Is there anything you want to learn? Like, you tell me, what would you like to learn about anything now? Because I'm done teaching you about the computer. What would you like to learn? You know what I mean? So it was. I mean, while I was there as a trainer, this was learner initiated in that the GM trainee was like, well, where do I find the guest surveys, or where are the guest survey results stored? And I could, based on that motivation and that desire to learn, I was able to engage with the new GM and show him where those things were. So these two things, formal and informal training, do not need to happen separately. They can happen at the exact same time. The only difference between the two is informal training is learner initiated, where formal training is trainer initiated. The benefits of employee training and development. It's obviously very intuitive that training and development is beneficial to an organization, but here are some specific benefits of those things. For example, the very top here, employees will be better or more efficient and effective in the organization, whereby helping achieve the goals of the restaurant. Okay, if we train and develop our employees, they're going to be more motivated to come to work. Okay, it creates a positive atmosphere, positive culture, if you will, and it creates greater workplace productivity. Again, through that being able to be efficient and effective within their roles. Well-trained employees require less supervision. Okay, so if an employee knows exactly what to do and when to do it, they don't need to ask a supervisor what or when they should be doing. I think, and I mean, I was working at a particular restaurant. I was just helping out because I worked at several different restaurants within a particular organization. I kind of went around and I helped. You know what I mean? I would train and I would go in and solve problems. It was kind of fun. At one particular restaurant, there was a server, and it was like every 5 minutes he'd have a question, and I got to the point where I would just throw it back at him and be like, "What do you think?" Right? Um, the amount of supervision that employee needed was just astronomical. Okay, it took up my time when I could have been, doing other things that were productive or specific to my role, right? Had that employee been more properly trained, right? Proper training also eliminates and reduces the quality and quantity of errors. Okay, it also reduces accidents at work. Okay, I think most of us have probably seen a Wimmis commercial. Okay, they're pretty awful and nasty. Okay, in some cases, those accidents and injuries could have been prevented with proper training and development. Um, if we're continuously training and developing our employees, again, it's a relationship and we're invested in it. It helps our employees and the organization, as a result, be more prepared to meet the challenges of the future, right? I think a great example right now is COVID-19. You know what I mean? If we were training our staff in workplace safety, PPE, things like that, um, we would have less, what you would hope, have less cases within restaurants. And overall, I mean, lastly, your company will be more successful in recruiting and attracting motivated employees. Okay, because if word spreads that we train and develop our employees effectively, and we want them to be better than they are, at their job, then that gets around. People want to work with employers that invest time and money in training so that you can be developed, right? Um, one in interviews, right? When an employer asks you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? The reason they're asking that question is, one, to see if you're motivated, but two, to see what kind of, development and training opportunities you'd be interested in, right? For example, when I first started when I was I had the interview process for a professor is intense. I went through 3 different interviews, the last of which was with the Lorraine Trotter, I believe is the dean for the CHCA and as an extension the chef school, and she said, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And I said, well, I think I see myself in a management position here at the college, right? And that gave her a good indication that I, A, was planning to stay with the college, B, that, I was motivated to continuously develop myself, and B, it's going to help her align, a development and training plan for me in the future because she knows where I want to go. So there's tons of benefits to training and development that aren't just restricted or restrained to helping employees be more efficient and effective at their job. The training process. So when people think about training, they immediately think to step number 4 here, which is selecting the proper training method, right? So the actual doing of training. But before we get there, we have to design a training program. Okay, and there's various steps in order to do this. First, you need to complete a training needs assessment. Okay, and in doing that, you need to look at or complete an organizational, person, and task analysis in order to understand what skills, abilities, and knowledge and behaviors are needed from the organizational perspective, from a person, and that's related to the tasks of each particular role. Number 2, we should be ensuring employee readiness for training. So making sure that basic skills, attitudes, and motivation are there, right? As leaders, we can create this or instill this motivation, and the program that we're creating needs to have a method of doing so. Number 3, we need to create a learning environment. So we need to show or create a method of identifying learning objectives and training outcomes, okay? And a method for practicing and facilitating feedback and just monitoring performance. Number 4, which is the actual training of training, is selecting the proper training methods. Okay, you'll find that for different for different outcomes or different learning objectives, there are going to be different methods that you would use, okay, to teach those how to be successful and the skills and knowledge and things like that. In our industry, and we'll talk about in the next slide, there's kind of just one method for training, and I've found it very successful. Now, the reason why we kind of only use one method here is because most of the skills needed in our industry are psychomotor skills. So that's, knife skills, knowing how to punch stuff in, creating dishes. So they're things that can be demonstrated. Okay, so you'll find that the hands-on method of training is used pretty often in our industry. On the other hand, there's presentation methods. Okay, so when I went to leadership training or even trainer training, it was more of a presentation where they instill knowledge, right? And then evaluate the training program. So every training program needs to have a evaluation mechanism to evaluate how you're meeting those training outcomes and whether you need to modify anything to increase the performance of the organization. So creating these training programs, the first step again was assessing the need for training and development. Okay, now the need for training and development can come up for a bunch of different reasons that I've listed here. An employee can request additional training in an area. We can identify through monitoring employee performance that there are some deficiencies. Okay, maybe there's some regulatory or legal changes within the restaurant, and we need to engage in training. Okay, so a lot of that was training for right now. A lot of the need for training within restaurants is around COVID-19. So we need to train our staff how to be effective and efficient, even within a COVID-19 context, and we have to train them to do that. Obviously, if we have a new employee, we have to train them and create a training program specifically for them. If there's any new equipment or technology, obviously we need to create a training program for those things as well, or else nobody will be able to use it. What was an example? I worked at a particular restaurant where we had a panini press. Now, we weren't trained on how to use it, although it was fairly easy and straightforward. So that was fine, but what we weren't trained on was how to properly clean it. So after a shift, we would clean it, but wouldn't clean it properly with the right chemicals, whereby it got caked with grease, and it affected our ability to create paninis or good-looking paninis because we weren't trained to effectively clean it. And then, so the safety issues, the COVID-19, that's a great example. So we've had, there's obviously safety issues around COVID-19. We have to be able to train our staff to avoid those safety issues, but also adhere to the law and regulations around it. Continuing with the needs assessment, in order to successfully complete a needs assessment, we have to really understand the training outcomes, or what somebody should be able to do after we've trained, or what we're aiming to have them learn. Okay, so in order to establish these outcomes, you need to ask yourself, what do trainees need to learn? Okay, who's going to receive this training? Okay, what kind of training we're going to use, whether formal, informal, and the frequency of this training. Okay, in order to create these outcomes, we also have to understand how these outcomes are going to be evaluated, right? So if you think about, our class as training, okay, we've established most of these things, what you're going to learn, who's receiving the training, the type of training, and the frequency of the training. How you're being assessed would be your tests and your assignments, right? You need to consider 3 different factors before implementing some of these training. You have to understand the strategic direction of the organization and whether the company has the budget and time and expertise for any specific kind of training. Okay, and you need to have the support and feedback of managers and peers for training activity, right? Because that's how these outcomes are evaluated, essentially. Employee readiness. Okay, this is also this employee readiness for training. Okay, so why do we have to make our employee ready for training? Well, the reason for that is sometimes an employee, when they're about to be trained, they're kind of apprehensive about the whole process, right? They don't know what they don't know. They want to be successful at something, but they don't know what they're trying to be successful at. Okay, so this can affect a little bit of motivation on their part. And one role that we have as managers or trainers is to, help them understand more about what they're about to do. And if we do that, it'll instill a bit more motivation to actually train through this process. So as managers or as trainers, we can increase employees' motivation level by helping them understand the purpose of training. Okay, providing information about what the training program looks like, what they're going to be learning. But helping them assure them that they have some of the basic skills required to be successful, and provide them support in in their ability to succeed, and express confidence in their ability to successfully complete the training program. If we do some of these things, or all of them, we're going to help motivate our employees to engage effectively in the training process. Their engagement in that process is absolutely fundamental to training. Okay, you can be the best trainer in the world, but if someone's too scared to engage properly in the training with you, they're not going to be as effective or successful in it as if you were employing some of these strategies here. Next, we have to create a learning environment within our organization. Okay, there are some specific conditions in which employees learn best. Okay, and these include creating an organizational culture that values learning and development. Okay, and provides the necessary resources to engage in that training and that development. Okay. In my particular restaurant that I worked at, we budgeted for at least $1,000, a week in training and development initiatives, and we communicated that with our staff to show them that we have a culture, or we're engaging or creating a learning environment where it values learning and their learning specifically. We want to encourage learning at all levels. So, you know what I mean? So the GM is continuously developing and learning just as much as a dishwasher is. We want to encourage people to learn from their mistakes, not, hold a mistake up in front of an employee, make an example of them. That's not an effective technique for creating a learning environment. We want to make sure that mistakes, that staff members learn from mistakes, but that we use it as a teaching opportunity instead of something bad that happened, right? We need to provide time for learning. Okay, ensure that if we're going to engage in training, that we're setting enough time to be successful in that training. And then always reinforce progress with ongoing feedback, right? So that's, saying good job, or, you're doing really well, being supportive, giving positive feedback, okay, instead of destructive feedback. So if we do these things, we're creating a learning environment within our restaurant or our organization, and this provides the conditions in which our employees are going to learn best. So selecting the appropriate training method. Okay, we have presentation methods or hands-on methods. Okay, presentation methods is where the trainee is a passive recipient of knowledge, right? This is very similar to an instructor-led classroom. Okay, distance learning, i.e. what we're doing, e-learning, but also conferences, field trips, and forums, right? It usually includes one expert that is communicating to a larger audience. Okay, and it differs from hands-on method, which is on-the-job training. Okay, this is probably what most of you received in our industry. Okay, and it's very common to be using hands-on training within restaurants. Okay, some examples of the hands-on method of training is, apprenticeships. Okay, mechanics do apprenticeships, cooks do apprenticeships, simulations. Job shadowing and rotation, which is what I like to use in the restaurants that I worked at, right? Or at least for the first couple days. And then special stretch projects where we help we help an employee develop by kind of making them feel like their knowledge is a little stretched, whereby providing an opportunity for them to reflect on their performance and better understand what they could have done better next time. Okay, so again, from this particular slide, I'd like you to take away that the hands-on method of training, which we're going to talk about in a second, specifically how you do it, is much more prevalent in our industry. Training preparation. As I mentioned before, training happens between a trainee and a trainer. Okay, the trainee needs to be motivated to engage in training, but as a trainer, you need to be an effective trainer in order to facilitate a good training session. So I have 3 things here that will help us become an effective trainer. 1, we make a timeline for the training. Okay, who's going to train, on which job, by what date, who will be the trainers if not you. Okay, so this helps your trainees and your trainers understand who's being trained when and on what. You're going to break down the job, so you're listing important steps or understanding the important steps as a trainer. You're picking out key points and making sure you understand why they're important. Okay, for example, safety is always a key point. And then get everything ready. So you arrange the work area, make sure all the right equipment, material, supplies are where they need to be. Okay, and you're pretty much prepared as an effective trainer in order to train. The only thing that's really left is understanding exactly how to perform on-the-job training, which is what we'll talk about in the next couple slides. Training evaluations. So when we're training, we need to help our staff or our trainers have the tools needed for a training evaluation as to whether the training has been effective or not. Okay, there's two general ways to do this. One is through coaching and mentoring. Okay, the role of a coach or mentor is to help provide guidance and feedback that a trainee will be practicing a new skill or how they're demonstrating that skill. Okay. Or performance appraisals, which is it's you looking at the outcomes and being able to check off whether a skill, a behavior, or knowledge has been properly trained or received. Okay, being able to measure the productivity or how effective the training is key to the success of training, because if you don't know what right looks like or success looks like in developing your training programs, how will you ever be able to understand whether someone's been trained properly or not? So having those key benchmarks in your training programs is absolutely essential for good training programs. So here's that how to train. Okay, so here's a 4th step method to training. Okay, where we first prepare the employee. Okay, we tell them about what they're going to learn, find out what they already know. Okay, and explain why the employee needs to learn that skill or behavior. Okay, we then instruct and demonstrate, telling them verbally, 1 step at a time, how to do something, showing them how to do it, and emphasizing key points. A important part to instructing and demonstrating a particular skill or behavior to a trainee is don't cram too much in. Okay, if you're going to take it step by step, make sure you're training specific skills at a time. For example, if you're training a cook how to make a bolognese, don't also teach them how to grill a steak at the same time, right? We want to make sure that we're being specific and that we're taking it slow. Next, you want the employee to practice. Okay, so the employee tries the task to see if they can do it based on the demonstration that you've given. Okay, what you want to do is don't stop them when they're practicing. Let them complete the task. Okay, and then once they've completed the task, give them some feedback. Correct any errors with constructive feedback. Again, we want them to be successful. We don't want to tell them all the terrible things they did wrong and be destructive. Okay, you can re-instruct or re-demonstrate if necessary. And again, the important part here is to give constructive feedback. Yes, let them know what they could improve on. Okay, that's why we call them opportunities, not mistakes. Highlight all the positives, and this will help build confidence in that in particular trainee. Okay, and then lastly, follow up. So encourage the employee to ask questions. Allow the trainee to work on their own after the instruction and the practice. Be available for them. Okay, um, have those open lines of communication whereby checking back frequently. Okay, and then evaluate at a later point and coach to maintain or improve in performance. So while this four-step process is written the way it is here in industry, I know this process as the TSDR. So that's TSDR. The T stands for tell the employee what they should be doing, what they're going to learn, and why it's important. Okay, this is the preparation stage. Show, or the S stands for show, which is you instruct and demonstrate, which is the second step, how the employee is going to do or complete a specific task. Do, which is the D in the TSDR, is where the employee does what you're teaching them to do. Okay, and then the R in the TSDR is follow up or review their performance with the employee or the trainee. Okay, and again, when we're providing feedback, we always want to be direct, but also constructive. So we call this the feedback sandwich. You tell the employee what they did right, where they could improve, and then you give them another good piece of feedback. It's the an example of this is thank you, David, for seating that guest. It's exceptionally important that we seat our guests in an efficient amount of time or in a short amount of time. I did notice, however, you did not point out the drink features. It's really important that we do that because this helps the servers sell beverages, right? But overall, you did a really good job and you're doing well, right? So I gave myself some good feedback. I had an opportunity that I coached them on, why it was important that they change that behavior, and then I ended off on a good note. Okay, so whether you call it the TSDR or preparation, instruct and demonstrate, practice and follow up, both are four-step training methods that has been shown in our industry to effectively train staff new skills and abilities. So the negative effects of a lack of training or poor training. Okay, as this picture looks, as you might guess, this picture is an unsuccessful attempt at making cupcakes, right? I have no idea what I'm doing. When employees have no idea what they're doing, they typically are unhappy, which leads to, because they're unhappy because A, they don't know what they're doing and they don't, they don't want to make mistakes and they feel like they're making mistakes. This leads to high turnover. So they say, screw you guys, I'm leaving because I don't want to feel like this anymore. Or they have low productivity and low quality of work, not because they don't want to be good at the job, but because you didn't set them up for success to be good at their job. It can create an unsafe work environment. For example, if people are not trained right now to engage properly with COVID-19 regulations, people could get sick, and that's not good. Okay, and if that was the case, and a lot of people got sick in the restaurant, you got to close your restaurant. Right? You lose customers and profitability because A, you're closing the restaurant, and then B, because no one wants to come back because there was COVID at the restaurant. Okay? So we want to effectively engage in training, and it's a great investment, not just for the employee because we want them to be successful, but also for us because we want to reduce all four of these things happening within our organization. So how to be a great trainer. Okay, so I've got a couple of things here that I've found that excuse me, have helped me become a trainer or a good trainer, and has helped me help other people become good trainers. One, lead by example. Okay, so if you're gonna say if you're gonna train people not to come in late, don't come in late. If you're gonna teach them to properly clean equipment, properly clean equipment yourself. Okay, your example helps them understand, people understand what's expected of themselves by extension. Know your subject. Obviously, if you don't know how to julienne an onion, you shouldn't be teaching people how to julienne an onion. You could hurt yourself and you could hurt them, or they could hurt themselves, right? Um, get to know your trainees, okay? This isn't, I mean, while training is going to be part of our jobs as chefs, it's part of their job as well. Okay, the training, I mean. So get to know them, understand where their development interests lie, what they need some more help with, what they feel confident with, and also be patient. Okay, nobody really tells you this, but we never expect you to get it right on the first crack. Okay, um, be patient with your trainees. Okay, allow them to make mistakes. Mistakes are how we learn, and just be compassionate as well. Be enthusiastic and have some fun. Okay, it's not always go 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 and learn this, don't do that, things like that. Have some fun with it, right? Maybe play some music, things like that. Joke, have a good time, and always be an effective communicator, right? So that's not just using constructive feedback or the feedback sandwich that I was talking about, but keeping that line of communication open with your staff is exceptionally important. Okay, again, you'll have a better idea of what they want to learn about in doing a task analysis or a people analysis when you're assessing the needs for training, but people will be more open to come if you communicate well with somebody or your staff, they'll feel more comfortable coming to you with any concerns that they have about their training and their own development. So that's all we have today for our little lesson on training and development. Um, like I've said, I've used all of these things in industry. Through creating individualized training programs to actually, training staff. I learned the hard way at first. And once I, engaged in a train the trainer session, which is pretty much what we just did here, I became a much more effective trainer and my staff were a lot more successful. And by an extension, the restaurant. So thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at david.cleary@georgebrown.ca. Talk soon. Bye.